yippee tree. You keep it safe. Yep, yep, yep.
That sound, you've heard it before, maybe as a kid sitting in front of the television, maybe years later with your own children. It is one of the most recognizable voices in animation history. Her name was Judith Barsi. She was 10 years old. By that age, she had already appeared in more than 70 commercials, starred on major television shows, and voiced 2 animated characters that generations of children would grow up loving. She never got to see either of those films in a theater, because on July 25, 1988, her father took her life while she slept, and almost everyone around her saw the danger coming. To understand Judith Barsi, you have to go back further than Hollywood. You have to go back to Hungary in 1956, during the violent uprising against Soviet control. In the middle of that chaos, 2 people fled the country separately, hoping life somewhere else might be better. Their names were Joseph and Maria Barsi. Years later, they met in California, where Maria worked as a waitress. They fell in love, or at least something that looked like love. They married, and on June 6, 1978, in Los Angeles County, they had a daughter. They named her Judith Eva Barsi. From the beginning, Maria believed there was something special about her daughter. She was fascinated by Hollywood and dreamed of giving Judith the opportunities she never had herself. She taught Judith posture, confidence, diction, and how to command attention in a room. People told her the odds of success in Hollywood were impossible. Maria ignored them. By the age of 5, Judith had already started acting professionally. By 6, she had an agent, Ruth Hansen, who later described her as a happy, bubbly little girl, and she truly was. That is what makes Judith's story so painful. This was not a child who looked miserable to the world. She laughed constantly. She charmed directors and crew members. Teachers loved her. Adults who worked with her remembered her as unusually bright, funny, and emotionally intelligent. Then she went home. The family lived in a house in Canoga Park, purchased largely with Judith's earnings. At her peak, she was making around $100,000 a year, an extraordinary amount for a child actor in the 1980s. The money paid for the family home, their lifestyle, and their future. But inside that house, something was already falling apart. Joseph Barsi had once seen himself as the provider of the family. But as Judith's career grew, something inside him changed. The auditions, the attention, the money, the success. It was all attached to his daughter's name instead of his own. He began drinking heavily, and when he drank, the atmosphere inside the home changed completely. He was arrested multiple times for drunk driving. He made repeated threats to kill himself. Maria killed Judith. Friends and neighbors later described a household ruled by fear. Before Judith traveled to film Jaws: The Revenge in the Bahamas, her father allegedly held a knife to her throat and warned her not to leave him permanently. She was only 8 years old. Despite everything happening at home, Judith continued working. She smiled on camera, delivered her lines perfectly, made audiences laugh. People often described her as remarkably emotionally mature for her age. Looking back, it becomes painfully clear why. In 1986, Maria finally contacted police and reported the threats and violence inside the home. Officers responded, but because there were no visible injuries and Maria chose not to press charges, nothing substantial happened. The family remained together. Over the next 2 years, the abuse worsened. Judith became increasingly anxious. Friends noticed changes in her behavior. She reportedly pulled out her own eyelashes from stress. She became fearful and withdrawn. At one point, she quietly told people she was afraid to go home. A neighbor later recalled Judith saying, "My daddy is miserable. My daddy is drunk every day, and I know he wants to kill my mother." Imagine hearing those words from a 9-year-old child. In May of 1988, Judith suffered an emotional breakdown in front of her agent, Ruth Hansen. Maria finally brought Judith to a child psychologist. The psychologist identified severe emotional and physical abuse and reported it to Child Protective Services. This should have been the turning point. Maria explained that she had already rented an apartment in Panorama City and intended to leave her husband. The case was closed. The apartment was real. Friends begged Maria to move immediately. But fear has a way of trapping people in place. Maria hesitated. And that hesitation would cost both her and Judith their lives. The cruelest part of Judith Barsi's story is that her career was reaching extraordinary heights at the exact same time her home life was collapsing. She had already appeared on shows like Cheers, Growing Pains, and The Equalizer. She had worked steadily in commercials and television. But 1988 was supposed to change everything. Legendary animator Don Bluth cast Judith as Ducky in The Land Before Time. Ducky, the cheerful little dinosaur constantly saying, "Yep, yep, yep," instantly became one of the most beloved animated characters of the era. Don Bluth later described Judith as astonishingly talented, with emotional instincts far beyond her age. She was only 9 years old when she recorded the role. Then came All Dogs Go to Heaven. Judith voiced Anne-Marie alongside stars like Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, and Lonnie Anderson. Everyone involved with the film reportedly adored her. During production, Judith recorded the emotional farewell scene between Anne-Marie and Charlie. She finished her lines and went home. She never returned, because she was murdered before the film was completed. Later, when Burt Reynolds came in to record Charlie's side of the goodbye scene, he reportedly requested a closed recording studio because he was too emotional to perform the lines in front of others. It took dozens of takes to finish the recording. Not because he was saying goodbye to a character, because he was saying goodbye to Judith. July 25, 1988. Investigators believe the murders happened around July 25, 1988. That same day, Judith was scheduled to audition for another animated project. She never appeared. Her agent called the house. Joseph answered and claimed Maria and Judith had left in a large car headed for San Diego. The story made little sense. The next day, he reportedly said he planned to move out soon, but wanted a little more time in the house so he could say goodbye to his daughter. By that point, investigators believe Maria and Judith were already dead. On July 27th, a neighbor heard a gunshot and called police. When officers arrived, the house was on fire. Inside, they found Maria Barsi in the hallway. They found Judith in her bed. Both had been shot in the head. Gasoline had been poured throughout parts of the house and ignited. In the garage, officers found Judith Barsi dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. All three were gone. Judith Eva Barsi was 10 years old. In her short life, she had appeared in dozens of television episodes, commercials, and films. Millions of children would continue hearing her voice for decades without ever knowing the tragedy behind it. Judith and Maria were buried side by side at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. The Land Before Time was released 4 months after Judith's death. All Dogs Go to Heaven followed the next year, with the film dedicated to her memory. Judith never saw either movie completed. There is one question that continues haunting stories like this. Not how it happened. We know how. The warning signs were everywhere. Police were called. Neighbors were concerned. Friends noticed changes. A psychologist filed reports. Adults knew this child was afraid. The real question is, why didn't anyone stop it? Judith told people she was scared to go home. She said it out loud. And still, the system failed her. The space between warning signs and action became the place where Judith Barsi died.